Good evening, members, and welcome to this live stream question and answer introduction to candidates standing for election to the RAO's board. I'd like to welcome the four members that have put themselves forward as nominees for the board vacancies. You have Danny Maynard, Simon Ozane, Andrew Schafers, and Mick Monk. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Peter John and I'm your host and moderator for this evening. In terms of the details of where RAOZ is moving to, voting is now open to fill two vacancies on the RAO's board. Ballot papers and return envelopes are in the Sport Pilot magazine, which we're all enthusiastically looking forward to receiving, and it will be in the post very shortly. Voting closes last mail on Friday the 25th of September. RAOZ then expects to know the results early October, and members will be notified accordingly. Tonight is the first in a series of 3 opportunities to engage with the candidates. We expect to run for about an hour, depending on the interest and the volume of questions that we field during the course of the broadcast. Tonight's opportunity is for candidates to discuss their candidacy. Candidates will stick to the facts. I might also remind you that candidates are not expected to be technical experts in any particular sphere of operation that RAOZ is responsible for. Candidates are invited to freely express their opinions on any matter. And questions will be put during the live stream, and we'll try to get to all the questions and give all the candidates equal opportunity to respond to each question. So I'd like to now invite the candidates to give a brief detail and discuss their candidacy. So we might start with Danny. Danny, welcome. Would you like to kick off tonight's discussion?
Thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name's Danny Maynard. My background, I specialise in human factors and I'm a safety investigator in aviation. I currently work for the Department of Defence as the Deputy Director of Aviation Safety for the authority there, similar to CASA. We've got a defence version named DASA. However, I don't want to bring a defence mindset to this particular role because I feel that that is more of a regimented, regulated way, whereas the reason we are all here is because we do it for fun. We love to fly. So I would have a different approach to bringing to the board.
Thanks, Danny. Now I'd like to introduce Simon. And Simon, please correct me if I've mispronounced your surname.
Well, thanks, Peter. My surname is Ozane, Simon Ozane, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. And thank you, Peter, for acting as moderator and also to the other candidates. My background is predominantly in defence, like Danny. However, I spent 21 years in uniform as a pilot. Prior to that, I was in and around aviation, and since leaving the Air Force, I've continued to be around aviation. I've flown for a number of commercial operators, and in more recent years, I've actually established my own company providing aviation consulting. In my time, it's about 30 plus years of aviation experience. I've flown all over the world. It continues to be a passion of mine, along with the outdoors and technology. I own my own aircraft, and I guess you would say I'm relatively recent to recreational aviation, having only really been involved for the last 4 or so years. For those who haven't read the candidacy statements, very quickly, my qualifications, I hold air transport pilot's license as well as recreational and remote licenses. I've got several diplomas, and as you can probably appreciate from my background, I've worked in the industry for a number of years with most of the regulators. There is obviously several challenges, I think, that are facing RAOZ. It's not to suggest that the organisation is in a bad position. I won't go into those particularly tonight, other than in response to particular questions. What I will say, however, is that none of that concerns me, and none of those issues, from my experience, are unique to RAAus. And basically, there's no point us shying away from those issues or your questions, concerns as members. And to be honest, sorry, Peter, what was?
Sorry, I was going to say, keep going. Yeah.
No worries. And what I was going to say is being able to overcome a number of these challenges is what will really truly set us apart. And I think ultimately the membership needs a strong board of directors to do that. And regardless of who's elected tonight, I think that RAAus is in pretty safe hands. So thanks again for the opportunity, and all the best to the other candidates. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Simon. Now, Andrew, similarly, my apologies to you if I've mispronounced your name, but please share with the members your candidacy.
You've had a rare day, Peter. It's very uncommon that someone gets it first time. So obviously someone gave you some tips there. That was awesome. So yeah, I'm Andrew Shapers, and like Simon, I come from a military background. I learned to fly when I was 16 in a little Piper Warrior in Adelaide, and that sort of sparked something to really get me going. I joined the Army straight out of school and became a Black Hawk pilot. I flew in the command, leadership and management stream of the Army in both Black Hawks and attack helicopters with the Americans for a couple of years, and flew all over the world in Pakistan and Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea. It was an amazing sort of young person's life. And then, like all of us, we had to grow up at some stage, although I'm not really sure if us pilots actually grow up. We just get a little older. But we started to stabilise our life, and I took the step of going into staff jobs. I worked in the military regulator at the predecessor to DASA, which was the equivalent of CASA at the time, so the Airworthiness Control Organisation. And doing that gave me a real insight into how governance and management worked in a much broader sense than the operational environment where I've been previously. Also, that gave me an opportunity to have a look at where I was in the world, and I decided to go and start a company. So I started Canberra Helicopters, where I wrote the documents and all of the management systems and infrastructure, bought all the helicopters and got underway. We ran for a couple of years before we decided that it was just too difficult in Canberra to run a helicopter operation. So I moved back offshore, and I started flying heavy helicopters offshore for oil and gas and for marine pilot transfer. While all that was happening, I decided that it was time to get back into aeroplanes. I've done about 400 hours or so of aeroplane flying over the years while I was a helicopter pilot. So I got my ATPLs for helicopter and my commercial for aeroplane. I got an instructor rating, instrument instructor rating, a bunch of other things along the way. And then a friend of mine said, "Hey, you should come and try these RAAus aeroplanes." And I went, "Are you serious?" And honestly, it was the best decision I've ever made in aviation. It's fantastic, some of the technology and the machines that are out there. And I've really enjoyed over the last couple of years since I've been involved, getting to meet some of the people that are in this organisation and see some of the fantastic bits of kit that we have in RAAus. So why am I running? What do I want to be on the board? Well, I think that I can add some value in terms of having had some experience dealing with CASA, but also bringing that sort of broader governance and systems-based decision-making and management stuff to our board, whilst keeping it real, because at the end of the day, we're here to have fun, and we're also here to grow a safe and capable training and management organisation.
Okay, Andrew, thanks very much for that. Now, finally, to an incumbent member of the board, Mick Monk. Mick, would you like to please share your thoughts and some details for those who don't know you in relation to your candidacy for the board?
Yeah, thanks, PJ, and thanks for agreeing to host and adjudicate the debate tonight. A lot of people will know that I've been on the board for 7 years, but equally, in fact, more so. There's more members I haven't met than I have met. So I came onto the board around about 2013. Prior to that, the organisation was in a bit of a state of disarray. We had a few financial difficulties and a few regulatory issues that we had to tackle, and that motivated me to get involved and straighten things out. Over the past 7 years, we've made a lot of changes to the board, to the organisation, and we've straightened out a lot of those things. And I think, my prime motivation for running is to finish a lot of those things that we've started. We've still got a lot of work to do, and I want to get it done. My background is a combination of formal training, experience, and of course my flying. So I've been flying since the mid 1990s, so almost 30 odd years now. I've only ever flown for fun. I have considered from time to time going down the commercial and perhaps airline route, but I've always sort of come back to the fact that I don't want to turn my fun into a job and lose my passion, so I've stayed there. Professionally, though, I consult in the management and strategic space, and I think that's a skill that I bring to the board. I've consulted with all sorts of companies, domestic, international, big ones like BHP, Telstra, IBM, etc., through to small not-for-profits. And I think I've demonstrated my experience at RA Oz with the ability to bring and implement those skills in the local setting. I think the big thing for me is that, as I said before, there's a few unfinished things. We've got the weight increase. We've got Part 149. As of this month, we're bringing the magazine back. That was a really hard decision to make a few years back to rein in some of the financial expenditure. We're about to deliver their promise to get the magazine back to all members for free. And like I say, there's a few other things that I want to finish off. But I think we've also, a bit like what Simon said, we've got to look forward. And there's some challenges, not just for RA Oz, but aviation in general. One of the obvious ones is going to be the recovery from the COVID situation at the moment. What does that mean for RA Oz? How do we cope? We're in a very good financial situation now, but we've got to make sure that we're stable for years to come. And any other future sort of growth and potential opportunities for RA Oz.
Okay, thanks, Mick. Very good. So I think now what we'll do is we'll cut over and we'll start to field some questions from the membership and give the candidates an opportunity to respond to those questions in turn. Okay, so I might kick off with a question while we're waiting for our colleagues behind the scenes to feed some of the membership questions into us. Folks, what do you think is one challenge, if I was to put you on the spot, which I'm not, but if I was to put you on the spot, what do you think is one challenge you see that is facing RA Oz in the short to medium term? Danny, we might start with you again. We'll keep the order going.
No worries. Thanks, Peter. On the spot, one challenge I do note that is female representation in the RA Oz kind of environment is of around the 5 to 6% that I'm aware of. I'm currently a member on the committee, part of the committee for the Women in Aviation, and part of my role there is to work in the outreach and education space to get more women involved and interested in this amazing field. With a background in government policy and negotiation, I have spent a lot of time influencing government in policy, and I feel that in association with the other members, we managed to get a really good grant from Michael McCormack in government to get more women involved, and we've got a really healthy budget. So straight off the bat, that would be one thing that I would like to improve right now.
Okay, Andrew, would you like to respond to that question?
Thank you. Yes, I think that we have an opportunity in RA Oz to work further with our other general aviation sort of representative bodies to unify in the causes that we choose to take to government in order to expand all of our membership bases. But also, we need to try and work harder to keep general aviation alive in Australia. RA Oz has done a fantastic job of developing a relatively easy to navigate, and affordable flying training system. And I think that one of the things we need to continue to develop is the safety and the standards that support that, so that we can make flying affordable and make it better for all of our GA operations throughout regional and remote Australia, where a lot of our membership base really is. Not everyone's flying the fanciest gear, but they're all still out there. And it's, I think, one of the challenges is to outreach to those people and try and help them either improve or stay in aviation and stay safe.
Okay, thank you. Simon, your turn.
Thanks again, Peter. Look, in a similar vein to what Andrew said, I think one of our biggest challenges, particularly coming through this pandemic, will be the uptake or maintaining membership. We will see a very different financial situation. We'll see a very different aviation situation. And we will need to, dare I say it, use the word pivot to be able to sustain and maintain and grow within that changing environment. And I really think that's going to require us to reach out, look at the opportunities, particularly with the downsizing in general aviation, looking at the opportunities to pick up in some of the areas that GA has foregone, and also to start working more broadly across the country to increase our membership and particularly the uptake of recreational flying across Australia. I would really like to see the country opened up significantly more than it is to pilots and flyers and to our membership base, to be able to support a number of the activities that really make aviation great and are what get our members involved. So that's a particular challenge. I think it's something that we need to be thinking, seriously about in the very short term. But again, look, these are not new or not unique to RAOs.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. Michael, obviously you have some key thoughts in relation to this particular issue, so I'd invite you to share them with the rest.
I think personally my key challenge is to identify one single challenge we face. I think we face a raft of challenges. We've got the obvious ones. We've COVID-19 at the moment. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. We've got a lot of people exiting the airline industry, which means that we could tap into experience and bring that into our ranks to help us learn from their experience. But equally, on the flip side, it means that there's less opportunities for freshly minted pilots in the commercial and above space, and that might present some challenges for that flow through of pilots where they use RAOs as an entry point into aviation. Having said that, we're in a good position in the sense that we've got about 3,500 aircraft, and that membership base there, the owners of those aircraft is going to be reasonably stable. So we're in a good spot there. I think we're also facing challenges in terms of maintenance. We've got to get new maintainers out there. It's not just an RAOs problem. It's an industry-wide issue. We're lacking skills and experience and expertise in that maintenance space, and I think we've got to put a bit of effort into building that up. But I'd also like to reinforce what Danny said. I think I'll focus less on the female and more of the minority sort of area. There's a lot of potential markets where we can tap into to actually grow our membership base. And of course, as our membership grows bigger, it means that we've got the same amount of costs spread across a larger base. So our per member costs go down. And I think there's some real opportunities there. But probably on the flip side of that, the biggest challenge we face, it's a mistake that RAOs has made in the past, is that as the organisation has grown and it's gained new things, new privileges, new abilities to do things, we've forgotten about our history. And it's probably, that'd be the one key challenge that I'd focus on here, is making sure that everything that members can do today, they continue to be able to do tomorrow without bureaucratic red tape, at low cost, in their own backyard. They've got access to it. So that'd be the one key challenge I think I'd focus on, is making sure that we protect what we've got today and work really, really hard to maintain that going forward.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mick. You've all given me a segue into the next two questions, which I'll combine in a moment. But Danny, I have a daughter who is a pilot and quite an accomplished pilot, and she'd be very pleased to hear what you've had to say about female integration. But moving on from that, brings me to the next issues. Probably an important one in the minds of the membership. Where do you think RAAus can improve? And in addition to that, what do you believe are the single best traits or trait that you will bring to the RAAus board to deal with that issue? So again, Danny, we'll keep the circle going. You'd like to kick off?
Sure, thanks, Peter. So an area I have considered that would be good to improve is in the increase. There's been an increase of fatal accidents, as we're all well aware of. And as a safety investigator, that is really important to me. As a human factors specialist, I focus on making sure the pilot does not get blamed for the incident. And in commercial aviation, where I've worked for a lot of the airlines, that has been history, that has been the case. And it is one of my biggest bugbears, because if you blame the pilot, that means you've stopped asking questions. You've come to an end and you're not interested in finding the root cause and the actual reason what made the pilot, if that is a situation, consider that at the time. So with an increase of, there was, I think over the past 3 years, about 9 fatal accidents, and in the past year or so, there's been 5. I would want to look at understanding the reasons behind that and the lessons learned from that, so we can help our members understand root cause analysis, the behaviours that led to this particular area, understanding all the human factors issues, which as pilots are human, maintainers are human, humans are involved in every single accident. So understanding the reason why these accidents happened is really important to me, and that would be something I'd want to look into as an area and to improve.
Okay, we might mix the order up a little bit. Mick, we'll come back to you and let you have a go.
Yeah, thanks, PJ. I think probably the key traits that I could bring are what I've demonstrated over the last 7 years. I think the organisation is on a stable footing financially. We've got good, stable staff at the moment. We used to have a lot of staff turnover, and we were constantly losing that sort of corporate knowledge and relearning things. One of the challenges we faced when I first came onto the board was commitments made by boards prior to me, and these things dated back 5 or 10 years. And we ended up finding that we were chasing our tail to keep track of what had been said and what had been promised to CASA, to other organisations, to members, etc. What we've brought in is the ability to manage those things, to track those things, bring in some really solid and sound governance into the organisation, and make sure that we follow through with our promises. Firstly to members, but also to those other key stakeholders that we've got. We do face challenges with safety, but I think what we've demonstrated over the past few years is that having those practices in place, rebuilding our relationship with members and whatnot, has enabled us to engage with that membership base and actually get messages out there and have them heard and listened to. And I think that's a real critical thing to have, is that ability to engage and relate to members. I've always just been a pilot for fun. I am just an ordinary member in a lot of ways. I'm privileged to be currently on the board and currently chair the board. But I think just having that real background and that real commonality with the members and being able to hear and understand where they're coming from is a real key trait.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Simon, would you like to have a go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Thanks again. Look, I think there's sort of 2 questions there. The first one is improvements, the second one's traits. I'll start with the improvements. In very simple terms, I'd like to see and work with both the membership and the board to increase 4 things. Very quickly, those 4 things are the uptake in recreational flying, and hence membership. Number 2, increase money in members' pockets. Number 3, increasing our reputation. And number 4, increased safety. And if I touch on each of those in a little more detail, increasing the uptake of recreational flying. I think there's a real opportunity to do that, and we've already spoken a little bit about it. As part of that uptake of recreational flying, I think we need to increase both the opportunities and the privileges for our pilots. I would like to see, as part of that increase in uptake, us targeting minorities, not just women, although I know that we do have quite low numbers of women, but also the younger flyers and perhaps even Indigenous flyers. Number two, increasing money in members' pockets. Mick sort of touched on this before, but obviously a bigger membership base means that we can spread costs across that membership base. But also, I would like to see, as part of that process, making it even more simple to be able to own and operate your own aircraft. The other benefit of increasing numbers in terms of finance is that it gives you greater leverage for things like insurance and the like. Number three, increasing our reputation. We've come a long way as an organisation, as a body with reputation. There is work to be done. We are now seen as a professional body, but I think improving our reputation and getting a broader experience base throughout our membership will give us much greater leverage to improve relationships with regulators and other industry bodies, which ultimately will lead to those first two, reducing bureaucracy, increasing privileges, and putting money back in people's pockets. And the last one is the increased safety there. Safety is a big priority of mine. I have a background in safety, a bit like Danny. We've had 9 fatalities in the last 3 years. Any fatality is not good. I would like those numbers down. I think that is too many. And if we increase our safety, ultimately it supports the first 3 things. So if we're seen as a safer organisation, more people will come and fly. If we're seen as a safer organisation, costs will go down and our reputation will go up. In terms of, traits. No, that's right. Sorry, I took a little longer than I perhaps should have with answering that question, or the first part of that question. But the traits that I would bring to the organisation, I think beyond my experience, really would be my tenacity and work ethic and my innovation. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Andrew, sorry to take so long, but the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Look, I mean, what do I think is something that we can improve on is the first part of that question. I would deeply love to see RAAus pilots become very similar in the level of privileges that are afforded to pilots that have trained in the CASA system. It astounds me that you can get a recreational pilot license by going to a Part 141 training school, and that training school could be using an instructor who's had pretty much the same instructor training as what an RAAus instructor has, and possibly even have completed some of their training in an RAAus aircraft. And yet, if you graduate from that school with a pilot certificate, you can come and go not into controlled airspace, but yet with a recreational license, you can. And I think it's those small details that we can chip away at by working with the regulator and our other sport bodies to try and achieve small increments in privileges for our RAAus members, but also through those privileges we can gather the ability to deliver training that supports the 141 training schools that are being managed by CASA in things like instrument training. I mean, one of the aircraft that I regularly fly is a Bristol, and we'll leave that at that, but it's got a full glass cockpit and an autopilot. It's better than many of the GA aircraft that are being used, or VH aircraft, because we're all GA really. It's better in terms of avionics and management systems than many of the other VH registered aircraft that are out there delivering IF training. But yet, because it's got 2-3 written on the side instead of VH, all of a sudden I can't use it for instrument training. It just doesn't really make sense to me. So that's the first thing I think we can improve on. How would I influence that? Well, I've been a chief pilot. I've had some experience dealing with regulators. I've worked for the military, so I know how to navigate the bureaucracy that exists in a large organisation, the government being one of them. And I think I can help out with that along the way.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. You've got the floor. We'll keep going. The next one is a question that basically puts candidates on the spot, so to speak. And it's from a member, and it's to do with membership fees. And the question is very simple. Do you support annual membership fee increases?
Look, I think that's a really fair question, because one of the issues of being a member of any organisation is, what value do I get from my membership fees? And I think the value proposition that RAOS offers needs to match the fees that we offer. I know that sounds like a political answer, but the question is, how much should fees go up? Well, I think no one would say they should go up at all. But the reality is, sometimes we have to incrementally step things up in order to be able to support the safety programs that we all need to manage the organisation. So I guess I would not want to see fees go up. I accept the fact that they might need to go up a few dollars, not very much. But what I would want to see is that whatever the fees are and whatever we set the fees to be, that we deliver value. Nothing annoys me more than sending a check to CASA for $75 for someone to click a button and send me back my license reprint. What? Why? I don't see the value in that. And I think in terms of fees for members, that's the most important question. It's not whether or not we're jacking fees up. It's what do we get as a member for the fees that we pay.
Okay, thank you. Simon, over to you.
Yeah, look, thanks again, Peter. I really support what Andrew's just said there. I think whilst I wouldn't like to see membership fees increase, and as per my previous answer, one of the things I would like to see, in fact, is more money back in members' pockets. I think it depends on the value for money proposition. I guess if we were looking to increase privileges, that may come at a cost. If we were looking to increase the MTO, for example, there may be a cost associated with that. And so would members be willing to pay that additional cost to support those increased privileges? I think in some cases, yes, provided it is a reasonable increase in cost. However, if we are looking to increase cost without returning anything to the membership base, well, that's a very tough pill to swallow. And I wouldn't expect the members to be happy about a decision like that. And I certainly wouldn't want to have to make a decision like that. I probably wouldn't support a decision like that unless there was very good arguments behind it. I think from what I've seen, that RAOS is in a very good financial position. And I think that we can afford to return some of that financial goodwill back to the membership without increasing fees.
Okay, thank you. Michael, your turn.
Thanks, PJ. I think Andrew and Simon have kind of nailed it. I think this is a value question, and certainly the current mood of RAOS is to make sure we don't increase the membership fees this year, given everything that's going on around us with COVID-19, the economy struggling and so on and so forth. But I think the longer term question, I agree with Andrew and Simon. I think it's really a value proposition, and to me, the question really becomes one of how much are you willing to pay to protect what you've got, and if let's go to the extreme example and say we paid nothing and RAOS disappeared, that would mean your ability to fly your own plane, maintain your own plane, fly somebody else's plane at relatively low cost compared to other forms of aviation, etc., goes out the window. But if we look at the upper end of the scale, we've got similar organisations to ours, similar structure, self-administered and whatnot. Their structure means that you've got to join a club, you've got to join a state-based body, you've got to join a national body, and you might even have to pay an insurance levy. And I think when we look at that as a whole, what you're getting in terms of value is actually quite competitive to other like-minded organisations. But something I'll throw out there is the hidden things that RAOS does. We don't shout it from the rooftops. Rather than have big public media releases and whatnot, We'd rather just go about our business and fight the fights in the background. And just by way of example, I've recently been talking to the Central Coast Council. I've been talking to the New South Wales government. I've met with Andrew Smith, one of the instructors at Warnervale Airport and whatnot. And I think that's where that value that both Andrew and Simon have mentioned comes in, is that you've got RAIs actively out there fighting for your cause in concert with some of these other organisations. I'd be loath to say that it's all due to us. It's not, but we do provide a critical piece of that puzzle, and I think that's where the value comes in. If we can, of course, we would lower fees. The cost of things is rising, unfortunately. But by way of example, we've just brought the magazine back. We made a hard call a few years ago to bring that back, make it digital only to reduce costs. But here we are, just a few years after that, and we've reorganised, we've reshuffled internally, and now we're providing that value back to members. So where we can,
Michael,
we will. Sorry, we'll keep the fees low.
That's a second into another question, actually. So do you support the Pilot magazine remaining free for all members?
The short answer is yes, but I don't think Danny's had a chance to speak yet. But look, I'm going to say, while ever we can afford it, I support it. I'll hand over to Danny.
Okay, and yes, and I'm aware of that, and I've not forgotten Danny, so don't worry. So, Danny, getting back to the original question, do you support annual membership fee increases?
So as everybody said, and I imagine anyone in an organisation would say, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and if the members are paying more, then they should be receiving more. In addition to what Michael has said, that RAOs don't shout from the rooftops all the amazing things that they do, I think it's actually important that we start doing that. I think because members can actually see value in what they're paying for, and there's some members out there that don't actually understand a whole lot that goes behind the scenes. And I think it's really important to express that so people can really understand, especially if they're paying good money. And as everybody has said, and I'll reiterate that RAOs is safety first. We want a pilot in every home. So every organisation in aviation has to be safety first and profit secondary. Currently with investigations and accidents, RAOs, when they go out to investigate, it is with their staff and it is with the limited training and the accessibility to evidence analysis that they have. Whereas ATSB, if the aircraft has a VH registration, ATSB attend all of them. So it's kind of unfair in a sense if you think about it, because they have a very big budget in comparison anyway, and they have a lot of resources. So I would feel that I would want to add more benefit in a way of training of our staff in order to offer more safety, and therefore we're going to have more of a cost benefit for our members. Okay,
so would you like to follow on from that in relation to the Sport Pilot question from one of our members, and it goes hand in glove with membership fee increase. Do you support remaining free for all members? What are your thoughts there?
I really do. Yeah, I think that if it is something that we can do, RALs can manage, then it is really a really good magazine, and it's really exciting for members to get. I enjoy it myself. So I think if that is indeed a possibility, then we should keep it that way. There is other ways to go around increasing or reducing costs. If the members are really enjoying this magazine and keeping it free, there is other ways. And with my experience in DASA, we do a lot of the promotion and engagement of aviation safety. And with Defence, we're all about making sure that we're cutting costs as we can. And we spend a lot of time trying to find cheaper ways of doing things, because it is taxpayers' dollars after all. So I think that kind of skill set in identifying ways of making it cheaper to produce such magazines and the like will be a real advantage to keeping this magazine free for our members.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Andrew, we touched on this issue just very briefly, or it was raised by one of the candidates a little earlier, and that's about partnering with organisations such as the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation and working to promote aviation to other disparate groups, including Indigenous students. Would you be keen as a board member, if elected, to work on a project such as that? And how do you think you might go about it?
Well, thanks. It's actually a question that's fairly close to one of the business objectives that's already running in one of the companies that I support. So I think that the thing. Well, first of all, let me get the first part of the question. Yeah, I absolutely think that we should be seeking to engage both with Indigenous people in Australia, but also any person in Australia who has an interest in aviation. One of the issues that we face in Australia is that whole closing the gap, and we have a whole bunch of government policies that are a real challenge to implement. What can we do as a small organisation? Well, I would support partnering with an organisation that already has deep links into that community, and I would support RAAus offering a couple of targeted scholarships that would allow a few people in those organisations, in those very vulnerable communities, to recognise the value not necessarily of aviation but of continuing education. As I said, one of my business partners is Indigenous, and he's very proudly Indigenous, and he's taught me a lot about how we as a community, and particularly a recreational community that supports a more broad objective of trying to make the world better, well, we can do that in a very small way. If we can influence one person's life to try and improve, then hopefully that person can influence the rest of their community. And hey, all we can do is try and progress, as a nation together. So yes, I would most certainly support some form of partnership arrangement, and particularly where we can offer relatively low cost events through some of our remote and regional schools, where we would bring in the members of their communities into their flight school to open up their hangars and sheds and participate in activities that are part of their community. And as a result of that, we get not only the PR benefit, but also the genuine community input, which I think is one of the outcomes of all community organisations like ours.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Simon, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I touched on this briefly before, but I absolutely support trying to promote aviation in not just Indigenous but minority groups. I would absolutely support a plan to engage with a particular community group that is already working in this space, to establish some scholarships and to work with communities to bring aviation across the country, basically to open it to everyone. Everyone should have the ability to experience flight. That's my opinion. I think aviation is more than just about flying. Aviation is about self-confidence. It's about, in some cases, teamwork. It's about understanding yourself, knowing your own limits. And all of those things, if taught correctly to within an Indigenous community, will have far-reaching benefits. I think and see that aviation is the perfect platform in which to do that, to work with and help these communities to open up avenues, and whether that's through, as I said, scholarships, or as Andrew said, working directly with local flying schools in some of these communities, or even reducing the costs of flying for particular groups. I would support all of those. I think it's important to recognise that we shouldn't just be targeting Indigenous. We should be targeting any minority group for that matter. And we've said it a couple of times. I think most of the candidates have said it, that our female representation is very low. So that's another area we could do very similar things. And again, I support that.
Okay, thank you. Danny, your thoughts, please.
Absolutely, thank you. I, as a Northern Territory born and bred, grew up in Darwin, born in Katherine. So my brother and I did a lot of flying around the Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory. And the clientele were Aboriginal people trying to go from the communities to Darwin. And he had many friends that were Aboriginal people that were really interested in flying. So we've already kind of touched on that in a personal sense, because growing up in the Northern Territory, a lot of my friends and colleagues have been Aboriginal people. And I think it's really important to not be ignorant in a sense of one size fits all. Minorities are minorities. And I think it's really important to educate yourself and go to communities and educate and sort of demonstrate what it is. And if it takes that, the communities will provide the information. But if it takes that, maybe tailoring it in a different sort of way. But I do think education is important, and reaching these outer communities that don't regularly have access to any of this information is extremely important.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Some very good points. Michael, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think the immediate answer is, yeah, why wouldn't we? I mean, of course, like any organisation, we're subject to financial constraints. We've got resourcing constraints and so on and so forth. And we've got to choose wisely where we choose to invest our time and effort. But I mean, if you read our constitution, the objects of the organisation of RAAus to pursue the advancement of aviation in Australia and to encourage training in the art and science of aviation, piloting, etc. It's a no-brainer, and quite frankly, I think the board would be negligent in its duties if it chose to actively not engage with these organisations, be it for Indigenous Australians or any other organisation, if it achieves those objects and it is able to do so without putting at risk the organisation as a whole. It's a good opening into a point that Danny raised. She talked about the ATSB investigating our accidents, and I think that's a really good example of where our resources and our money and effort and whatnot are invested in activities that we probably shouldn't have to do. In the CASA world, as Danny rightly pointed out, the ATSB is responsible for investigating accidents. They elect not to due to funding constraints, and I fully appreciate they've got their pressures, so this is not a criticism of the ATSB. But because they choose not to investigate our accidents, we dedicate a lot of time to sending our people on training courses. We've got the emotional and psychological impacts after they return from those accidents. So there's counselling and there's the obvious hard costs, travel, accommodation and whatnot associated with those accident investigations. And I think if we can work to offload some of those costs and maybe work with the government to better fund the ATSB, free up some of that cash, then I think that would help us to meet the objects of our company, to engage with these organisations, and it would free up those financial constraints that we've got and allow us to do that effectively. So the short answer is yes, subject to those constraints. I'd be absolutely 100% behind engaging with anyone to do that.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Next up, we have a couple of questions from members that relate to the proposed weight increase to 760 kilos. One question is to do with delivery of the initiative. The other is the benefits that weight increase might deliver. Okay, so what I might do is roll them up into a double barrel question so that we're not jumping backwards and forwards. So the question is, do you support the proposed weight increase? And what do you believe the benefits are? And how would you as a board member support this initiative? So we might kick off with Andrew this time.
That's a great question, and it's actually quite close to my heart. I mentioned earlier that I think that we should be focusing in the future on expanding the approvals of RALs, and part of that is because, like I said before, I think it's outrageous that we can't access the full range of airspace that exists over our wonderful country. But also, I think there's a good future for RALs to take over a good portion of those early phases of flying training. And if the 760 kilo weight increase would allow us to absorb a number of aircraft that are currently on the VH register delivering that flight training into the RAL's environment, partly that would reduce costs, but also that would give an opportunity for us to get some of that more complex gear that commercial pilots need to progress through their training. And I'm talking about, the range of engines and propellers that are out there that are representative of the general aviation fleet that a commercial pilot would be operating. So that's one benefit of the weight increase. The second one is, as an operator of a 600 kilo weight limited aircraft, it is very, very difficult to get a high level of equipment, including constant speed props and all that fancy avionics that I mentioned is in some of the RAL's airplanes that I instruct in. It's very hard to get that in whilst keeping it sufficiently lightweight to have a useful payload. A lot of these aircraft are built to the, and someone might have to correct me, so I don't misspeak here, but there's a light aircraft standard in Europe, the light aircraft standard, let's go with that. And it allows for 750 kilograms in this category. So a lot of the aircraft that we're importing into Australia could be built to and then certified against that standard, which would mean essentially aircraft that are already here could fly at 750 kilograms, massively increasing their payload, but with no significant detriment to their safety, and significantly changing the way their owner and also their operators could get around the country. So I absolutely support the weight increase because it allows us to expand our market, but also it allows the owners of our aircraft to take themselves, their friend, partner, wife, dog, whoever it is that's going to sit in that other seat, and a useful amount of bags and fuel and get about the country. And I think, as Simon's already suggested, if we can do that and we can get our flag out there so people can see what we're capable of, we'll expand the membership and reduce the cost for everyone.
Okay, Andrew, thank you. Danny, do you have some thoughts on that? Would you like me to repeat the question for you?
No, I'm pretty much across it. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
I would straight away, as a risk person working in safety, straight away I would want to understand the risk behind it all, as I'm not privy to that at the moment. So I'm absolutely confident that RAAus has considered the risks associated. In addition, I would be happy, as long as it doesn't increase any cost to our members, any increased cost to RAAus. Aside from that, I think there would be the overall growth would be a huge benefit with something like this. So I find that would be a really positive thing. I do want to point out, though, in regards to a board that represents the members of RAAus, having the same type of person with the same background covering your board, say there's 7 members and all of them are in the same field, same background, same understanding, I don't think that really delivers the most benefit to the members. I think having a board that is made up of different backgrounds, different expertise and different way of thinking is going to be the maximum benefit for the members.
Okay, thank you for that. It's very good insight. Simon, handing over.
Yeah, thanks again, Peter. Like the previous two, fundamentally, yes, I support the weight increase. There are a few questions that I would like answered before I would completely sign up to it. I too have a bit of a background in risk, and so again, it's hard for me to take that hat off. I would want to understand, and again, I'm sure that it has been considered, what the original limitation was imposed for, and what is the risk in potentially increasing that. Furthermore, if there was to be any sort of increased cost across the membership as a result of that, or any increased bureaucracy in order to achieve that increase in weight, I think we would need to consider that very carefully as well. But the offset is clear. Increased weight means greater flexibility in what members can do. It means that we can further operate across the country for range and payload and all those sorts of things. I also see that there is benefit from a safety perspective. Increased weight means that you can improve what is actually fitted to aircraft or add additional systems, which inherently increases safety. And the final point is that really what you would enable here is for us to bridge that gap that currently exists between recreational aviation and general aviation. sort of need to, I think, expand a little bit more and pick up some of that, bottom end GA work, and certainly the training type roles that Andrew's spoken about. I think there's real opportunity there for RAOs, but without a weight increase, I think it would be quite difficult to achieve that.
Okay, thank you. Michael, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, I unequivocally support the weight increase. I think there's a few important things to keep in mind. Firstly, points that have been made earlier. Let's make sure it doesn't come at the expense of what our current members currently enjoy, be that access to aircraft, their current privileges, their costs, etc. I think we've got to keep that in mind. But I think one of the important things is that the weight increase, as it currently stands, is about taking aircraft that already meet accepted design standards, a bit like what Andrew said, and enabling more people to take advantage of the system that RAAUS offers, the freedom to maintain, the freedom under our medical system, and so on and so forth. We're not talking about bringing dangerous aircraft or wacky things that we've never considered onto the register. Every aircraft that comes on would be built to an accepted standard. The aircraft are already flying, essentially. But I think the other thing is, in terms of opportunities for members, what this means is, the way I view it is, I'd love to see a world where we can work closely with organisations like the SAAA. They've got some really, really in-depth experience in building aircraft, maintaining aircraft, designing aircraft, doing all of those things. And a lot of their members have already approached RAAUS and they've said, we'd love to operate under a scheme like yours. How do we do it? And unfortunately, the thing that's stopping them is that weight increase. So if we look at the classic home-built aircraft is a Vans aircraft, and without a weight increase, there's fewer aviators that have access to our system of flying to operate the aircraft that are already flying. So I agree with everything that both Simon and Danny have mentioned in terms of risk, but I think we've got to put it in perspective. These aircraft are already flying; they're already being operated. These are just people that want to take advantage of a system that is not CASA. And in that sense, I support it unequivocally.
Okay, thank you for that. I have one final question, and I'm conscious of the time, so I'll ask this question of each of you, and then I'll give each of you the opportunity to sum up, and then we'll close the meeting. So the question is, and it's a board-related role question, what do you believe the board's role is in relation to safety management? And similarly, what do you believe the role of the board is in relation to regulatory compliance? So Simon, we might kick off with you, if you don't mind. So safety management and regulatory compliance from a board perspective.
My apologies. I just lost my mute button there momentarily. Look, I think the role of the board is one of overall governance, management and strategic direction of the organisation. We have a role to play in safety, but it's not necessarily one which we need to be overly hands-on with. We will guide, influence all of those things that managers and management encompasses. And certainly, we should be taking a very active interest in it. But we need to be careful that we are maintaining our role as members of the board, as directors, and not trying to take over the safety management of the entire organisation. And sorry, the second question was again?
In relation to regulatory compliance. So I think you've wrapped up the answer and you've folded the two in together.
Yeah, in that case, I think I have.
Okay, all right. Danny, would you like to respond, please?
Sure. So in my opinion, the board is there of governance. The board are made up of people that have a lot of expertise and experience and can offer advice to the organisation and make sure that we are, the board and the organisation, on track with everything that they need to do to run an effective business, and make sure that our remit is being there for the pilot. We have a saying that we want a pilot in every home. So that is the fundamental that we have to make sure that we're working towards. So of course that covers safety, that covers the cost, that covers risk. There is a lot that comes into it, but as the board is there to govern, not to dictate or drive. And in the regulatory side of things, RAE Aus is there to ensure that their members can do what they love. We fly for fun because we love it. We don't want to be overly regulated. We would go to VH aircraft or join the military for that sort of thing. So fundamentally, we need to make sure that we stay with what RAE Aus essentially was designed for.
Okay, thanks, Danny. Michael, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, I think Simon and Danny have nailed it. The board's role, I think, both in terms of regulatory compliance and safety, is like every other role. It's a governing role. It's not a hands-on role. I think we've got a legal and a moral obligation to make sure that our members are looked after. But in terms of especially, well, both of those things, be it the red tape or whatever you want to call it around safety, and the regulations that we're subjected to, I think the board's role is to make sure that it's easy for members of our organisation to be safe and to be compliant, and where it's difficult to be compliant or regulatory compliance doesn't make sense, it's our job to go into bat with the regulator and actually make it simpler. You look at Part 61, which is the licensing part of the Civil Aviation Safety Regulations, and the regulation coupled with the MOS, coupled with all of the supporting material, runs into literally hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's our job to basically simplify that down, distill it down to the bits that matter for our members. And it's not so much about us making sure our organisation is safe or making sure our organisation is compliant with the regulations. It's making sure that our members are free to operate in a simple, effective way that is safe and that is compliant, and create that system and make sure that system goes forward into the future.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Andrew.
Yeah, as Michael said, I'm pretty sure that we're here because we understand the role of the board. How do you articulate that? Well, the management's job is to run the place and deliver the services and provide the member interfaces that are needed to make sure that we can all get about our recreational activities and our training activities. The board's job is to look upwards and outwards. Where next? What else can we do? How can we make it simpler? And more importantly, in terms of regulated compliance, where are we not complying? And where can we make sure that we either comply or we come up with a strategy with the regulators to make it so that we don't need to comply with unnecessary stuff that just gets in the way of our organisation. The role of the board is to build the relationships outside the organisation, so the guys who are running the place actually in the head office there can get on and get on with delivering the services that we all need, so that we can all go and fly our aircraft and get about our hobbies.
All right, thanks, folks. But while we've been talking, we've had a couple of other questions come in from members. So if we're all comfortable with that, we might flick them up. So it looks like we have a question from Ben Morgan. And for those of you who don't know, Ben is the CEO of AOPA. And the question is, one of the greatest risks to the future of aviation in Australia is the closure of regional airports. Could each of the RAE Aus directors or candidates detail their thoughts as to how RAE Aus could contribute towards protecting our access to airfields nationwide? And I think that's a great question. So we might, Andrew, you had the floor, so let's keep going.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks, Ben, for your question. It's very close to my heart. Obviously, here in Canberra, most people would consider us not regional, but if you've walked on the paddock lately, I'd suggest you'd probably find that it is. It's my opinion as a commercial pilot that the death of regional airports is the death of general aviation in this country, and it is our job as the board to support all of the other general aviation organisations that are out there championing the causes of those airports, both in terms of helping to minimise the privatisation of those airports, or where governments make the decision to privatise those airports, that the costs and the accesses to those airports remain low in terms of cost and high in terms of access, and also the facilities aren't allowed to degrade, such that the operator of that aircraft can say, or that airport can say, oh, no one comes here anymore, so I guess we'll turn it into a business park. You know, airports, and not just in the big cities, airports everywhere are fantastic banks of land, and it is our job as RALs to protect them and to fight for their interest in concert with the other users of those airports. And AOPA is a fantastic body with whom we should continue to work in order to make sure that our members can access their airports, and they're all over the place. They're not just here in the big cities. And if we help them and we help the rest of our GA and VH registered brethren, I'm confident that the RALs can play its part to champion that cause. Specifically, how can we help? Well, conveniently, our headquarters is in Canberra, and last I checked, there was a big building with a giant flag on it where we can just go and bail them up and have a chat. And I reckon that's a great opportunity for our organisation to support, if not lead the charge, to make sure that airports remain accessible and low cost. It burns me up the amount of money that it costs some of the places I want to land my 600-kilo aeroplane. Really, why does it cost so much? So that's what I reckon we can do.
Thanks, Andrew. Michael, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. I fly from Canberra as well, and it's incredible. It's only just recently that we've, as pilots who subjected to security checks and whatnot, have actually had free access without getting patted down, basically at the gate at Canberra. That's only come in the last probably about 12 months or so, give or take. I know RAOS has made representations to a number of airports. I mentioned Warnervale earlier on. We've been down to Mildura in the past. I know we actively participated in getting some facilities upgraded and maintenance done at Gympie Airport in Queensland. The story goes on. There's a lot of stuff that happens around the country that RAOS is supportive of and very active in, and I'm supportive of that continuing. I think the big thing for me is the balance. Right or wrong, at some point in the past, airports were privatised, and in a lot of cases, they've gone to big conglomerate organisations, publicly listed organisations, airport funds, and so on and so forth. And their motivation is not airports; their motivation is profits, and that presents a real challenge. But on the other side of the coin, we've got a lot of regional airports, which Ben has specifically called out, that are actually struggling. There's a lot of small councils around Australia that actually struggle to balance their own budgets. And then, a decade or so ago, they got lumped with this additional asset that turned into a liability because, okay, it's a land, it's an asset, but they've got to maintain it. They've got to maintain runways, taxiways, some cases, runway lights, and so on and so forth. And I think as responsible aviators and RAOS as a collective of those responsible aviators, we've got to come up with a balance between going head-to-head and shouting at the airports, you're killing us, and realising that, as Andrew said, without the airports, we don't exist. And making sure that, we complement the airports and we're not just butting heads with the airports. We are in Canberra. We have access to the department. We have access to the regulator. We have access to the government. As Andrew said, there's a big flag on the top of the hill, and we regularly pound a path up there to talk to politicians. The challenge we face, of course, is that aviation is nothing in Australia. In the Department of Infrastructure, they'd much rather build bridges and highways and cut ribbons for billion-dollar projects rather than support a small regional airport that no one ever sees. And that's a challenge we face, but it's one that we are up for. I'm up for going forward, and it's certainly one that we've faced in the past, and we will continue to.
Okay, thanks for that. Danny, can I have your thoughts, please?
Certainly. So working in a lot of different government roles and working in the Women in Aviation, we have access to the Department of Infrastructure. So the minister there, and he has recently released that he has done I think it was 3 runways. He's provided funding so that they can put 3 runways out in the community in the Northern Territory. So I think having an influence in policy and government and knowing how they think and who to access is a skill set that I really have to offer. And daily I'm in communications with all these different areas of government. In addition to that, I'm a member as a member on a number of different organisations within aviation throughout Australia, and the Australian Airports Association is one of them. So I think it's really important having a board member in touch with the actual associations of these different airports to find out what they think their problems are, where industry or other people can help, and really just being proactive in that sense.
Okay, thanks for that. Simon, I think it is now, isn't it? Simon?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, a lot has been said. I'll touch on a couple of points that I think are pertinent. I think recent crises have demonstrated the importance of regional runways. That's the first point I would make. It's been said by a couple of the other candidates that without access to these regional airports, we will find it very difficult to exist. We'll certainly find it near on impossible to expand. So we need to ensure that we continue to have access to these runways. If we don't, what you may find is people start to build their own private strips, which in my opinion can be far less safe, and that can lead to a whole bunch of other problems. So we need to ensure that we are working with these regional areas to find out the issues, try and understand both their perspective and have them understand our perspective on the need for the runways. We could potentially tie that into some of the other discussions we were having about engaging with regional communities, minority communities, show that we are supporting those communities through aviation, and in turn that may lead to them providing us support for these particular runways. We need, I think, as an organisation to promote the opportunities, flying, whether it be flying holidays or the ability to get out to some of these airfields. There's some great airfields out there with some great facilities with very welcoming owners who would love nothing more than for RAAus members to visit. And we should be promoting some of those regional airports and some of those private strips. Simple things like supporting and promoting fly-ins. I think they're all things that, as an organisation, we can be doing, but more so, as the other candidates have touched on, the making representations, participating in a number of the campaigns, and I thank Ben for his question. I know that AOPA has been very vocal in this space and have had some great success. I also note from what's been said that RAAus is already involved in a number of these campaigns and support to a number of these organisations who are pushing for regional airports to remain open, and we need to continue to do that. I think there's also a bit of an opportunity. Some people talk about Part 139 and the impact to regional airports. I think there is potentially an opportunity there with the changes that are coming about as a result of that. I do a lot of work for CASA in another role in looking at and revalidating airfields and instrument procedures at those airfields. And so I'm intimately familiar with what is wrong, what the problems are with regional airports in trying to maintain their own airports and their own certifications and all those things. Part 139, there is a potential opportunity there, and we should seize that. I'll leave it there.
Thanks for that. From personal experience, I can share with you and the members that I'm involved in a rather large recreational airfield on the northern outskirts of Brisbane. Council did a cost-benefit analysis to the community not so many years ago, and that regional sport and recreational airfield was worth over $3 million a year to the community. So no commercial operations there at all. Okay, This will be our final question, and then I'll ask each of you to do a wrap up. So from Paul O'Rourke, and Paul, thank you for the question. The 2023 plan was to have a pilot in every home. Warrnambool and Cobden have no instructors. How do you plan to meet the 2023 plan of a pilot in every home? So, Danny, we might kick off with you first, please.
Sure. Thank you, Paul, for that question. It's a really good one. The 2023 plan to have a pilot in every home is really important, but it is an ongoing plan, I believe, and it is something that RAAus has always wanted. We are finding ourselves in the situation of COVID, and everyone understands the effects that that's having on us. So we have to adapt. We have to do a gap analysis in the sense of all the areas that we are lacking in, all the areas that we can improve on, such as in Warrnambool, you say there's no instructors. That's a very important point, and there's going to be a whole lot of other areas that have that same thing. So that will just be one thing that we need to consider, and after doing the gap analysis, we'll be able to identify a number of other things, and that will give us a program of work that we can start chipping away at and can demonstrate to the community, to the members, that we're here essentially to improve your service to you, to work for you guys in a sense.
Okay, thank you for that. Simon, handing over to you.
Thanks again. Look, I think it's an interesting question. How can we achieve that plan if we have no instructors? Look, I'm not sure that the background behind either of these two locations and why there are no instructors. Obviously, it's an issue. It's not going to help us achieve our 2023 plan. I think, as Danny sort of alluded to, that plan is somewhat of a vision. It's a rolling target. Certainly, we are aiming for that, and I would love nothing more than to have a pilot in every home. I couldn't think of anything better, to be honest. I think, but we need to understand, well, why is it that we have no instructors in these locations? That's one aspect. What else is not working? Where else are we falling down in terms of not achieving that 2023 program? Where do we need to focus our attention? How can we address this? And what are the limitations on making that a reality in getting a pilot in every home? Is it cost? Is it what we were just talking about, limited access to airports? Is it something beyond that? Is it not attractive to certain members of the community? All of these things we need to look at holistically, and we need to address them. We will never be successful in having a pilot in every home if first we don't understand why people are not interested in aviation and there is no uptake in aviation in some of these regions, and we don't address them. And we need to get on the front foot and find out the answers to these questions. I think that probably some of the answers are quite simple to resolve, to be honest. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. And Andrew, your thoughts, please, on the subject.
That's a great question. And again, being actively involved in a flight school in the capacity of both a RAAus instructor, but also an instrument and VH instructor, I completely understand one of the key issues because I face it myself. And when I talk to some of the other instructors that I meet around the place, they have the same question. So I'll come back to the answer, or what I see as one of the things that we can do to solve the problem. The first thing is, who is an instructor in RAAus? Well, we can grow them internally. So in RAAus, you can become an instructor by completing an RAAus instructor course. You don't have to be a professional pilot. You just have to be someone with an enthusiasm for instruction and do some training. And we can deliver that training at a few places in RAAus. The challenge is that we don't have very many schools in RAAus that can deliver that flight training. And also, we don't have very many examiners who can deliver that exam, the flight test, to an instructor. I'll give you an example. I know a GA instructor or a GA pilot who wanted to come and get an instructor rating. He found a place to do the training, but he was really struggling for quite some time to find an examiner to actually do the flight test and deem him suitable to conduct RAL's instruction. So that's a key issue we have in our own space that we need to have a look at. How do we grow recreational pilot examiners, and how do we make sure that our CFIs have the standards, qualifications, and most importantly, experience to be able to become examiners and deliver both flight training and flight tests towards instructor ratings. The second half of that is how do we encourage a professional pilot who has an instructor rating? That person might be a grade 3. It's a very beaten path in the VH world to finish a commercial pilot's license, roll onto an instructor course, and then work in a flight school under the supervision of a very experienced CFI and build your flying hours and experience whilst delivering ab initio and eventually over time more detailed and more complex flying instruction. How do we get those people to choose to come to an RAAus school? Well, one of the key issues that faces us there is the fact that CASA does not appear to recognise instructor hours completed in a RAAus registered aircraft towards progression in your Part 61 licence. So if you are, and it sounds complicated for those of you that aren't instructors, but let me make it simpler. The hours where I teach in a Bristol, which can be put on the VH register, currently don't count towards me getting an upgrade to a grade 2 or a grade 3 in my Part 61 CASA license. But yet, the student that I teach in a 2-3 registered or a 2-4 registered RAAus aeroplane can count those hours towards his PPL or his recreational pilot license. What? That's a key issue that I think if we can engage with CASA, find out the root cause of that policy decision, and then remedy it, I think we'll find it a lot easier to attract instructors. And one of the things that you would observe at a flight school is that people start out because they're going to instruct and then they're going to go to an airline. A lot of people find out they actually really like it and they stay in the industry. So I think that's probably the two things that we can look at. Where do we get examiners from? And how do we get CASA to recognise our instructors' flying hours like they do our students so that we can encourage instructors to join our system after they've completed a grade 3 through CASA?
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. Michael, I'm sure this is a topic that has given you many sleepless nights in terms of the degradation around the countryside. So would you like to share some thoughts with us?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of good material here on this topic. I think one of the challenges we face, and I'll caveat this with, I'm not 100% familiar with Warrnambool and the local area, but I have been to Warrnambool. I know they've got a great little, from memory, I think it's a cross strip, both sealed, and they've got some really good facilities there. But my recollection is that it's a reasonably small town. I'm guessing around about 40,000 people at a guess. Now we add to that the catchment area, the broader catchment area of the Warrnambool Airport, and that number obviously goes up. But the problem that we face is both two-sided. A lot of the others have focused on the instructor side, but I just want us to think about the demand side and simply say that if you open a school in a location, there has to be enough business there to cover your costs. And it's not just a matter of buying a low-cost second-hand aircraft and setting up at an airport and delivering instruction. You've got to invest in those things that Andrew was just talking about, getting qualifications, maintaining your qualifications. You do, of course, have to invest in the aircraft itself, but you've got to have facilities to train. There's insurances that you've got to cover. There's airport costs and whatnot. And all of these things have to be somehow funded. Now, if there's not sufficient demand for training services and you can only fly 10 hours a week, a lot of our instructors would be lucky to make, I don't know, $30, $40 an hour in some cases to do that. And you do the maths. If you're delivering 10 hours of training a week on $30 to $40 an hour, that's only $300 to $400 in terms of your actual income. And I think what we need to do is we need to change a little bit the culture and say to people, and again, I'll lean on Andrew's words a little bit, say to people that instructing isn't just a stepping stone. it is a career in and of itself, and it's one that can be quite rewarding, and you can satisfy yourself. I know a lot of people that have stayed instructing for quite a long time, and they do find it quite rewarding. But on the supply side, we've also got a big opportunity. At the moment, we've got a lot of airline pilots laid off. At the upper end of the scale, we've got a lot of people who previously had 4 bars on their shoulders, captains of especially the bigger aircraft, 380s, 747s that have just been retired at Qantas. There's a lot of experience, and I think there's an opportunity for us to tap into that experience. And they'd be the people who are ready for retirement anyway, but they might want to share their experiences with others. And there's a real opportunity there to go to this cohort of guys and girls that are retiring and say to them, do you want to share your experience with the next round of aviators, and create some opportunities to learn from the tens of thousands of hours that these guys have got.
Okay, thanks, Michael. That brings us towards the end of the session, folks, and we apologise to those who we've not been able to pull up the questions and answer tonight, but we are having another forum in a couple of weeks. The next forum will be well publicised by RAAus. So those questions that are not answered tonight will be addressed as the priority in the next forum. So thank you to the members for staying with us for as long as you have. What I might do now in terms of the wrap-up is ask each of the candidates to take 90 seconds. And this time I'll be quite strict with the time. So if you could take 90 seconds to just wrap up the candidacy and colloquially sign off, that would be lovely. And then I'll close the live chat. So Danny, we'll start the order that we'll finish off in the order we started in. So if you would like to finish off for us and say good night.
Certainly, Peter. I just want to thank everybody who stayed with us and listened to us. It's really important to us to make sure that we serve you and all the members and the board really well. We've got a really great lot of candidates here that are very experienced, very interesting, and can really offer a lot. Can I just say that each of them all spoke about the minority and how minorities are really important. And I do want to point out that RAAus have not had a female representation on the board before, and I am the only female representing now as a candidate. So I'd like to just point out, not just because I'm a female, I want to advocate for pilots. It's my passion. I want to keep costs down, and I want to make it accessible for everyone. They're the three main goals I want to really achieve in this candidacy.
Okay, thank you very much, Danny, and thank you very much for your time. Andrew?
Thanks very much. I'm going to make a lousy politician. I tell a good story, but I'm not so good at summing up in a few words. But what I would say is thanks to everyone for listening. We do appreciate your time. And what will I do if I was on the board? Look, just get on with it. That's what we do. That's what I've always done. I want to see us grow as an organisation, and I want to see us partner with our fellow general aviation bodies and work with CASA to make sure we achieve safety and reliability, but also that we can all get about the business of doing our hobby, and where we can, leverage those opportunities to expand our organisation through the use of our training capacity and the delivery of high quality, low cost aircraft into training organisations.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. And once to you also, thank you very much for your participation and your time. Simon?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thank you for being the moderator this evening, and to all our members who have stayed on and for their questions. I think it's been a really productive and interesting discussion across the evening, and I look forward to the next one. In very short and simple summary, we do have a number of great candidates that are vying for a position on the board. Like the other candidates, I want to see some very simple things. I want to see costs remain the same. I want to see members be able to continue to operate as they currently are with the freedoms and the safety that they are afforded currently. Further, I want to see our membership base expand. I want aviation to be more broad than it currently is. And the idea of a pilot in every home really appeals to me. I think moving forward, that's where we need to be targeting. That's what we need to be looking at. And certainly, as a member of the board, that will be my real focus, is how we continue the great work that has been done in RAOs over the next several years, so that we can ensure our members have the access that they want to the aircraft and in all environments. Thanks again.
Okay, Simon, thank you very much for your input as well tonight. Michael, handing over.
Yeah, like the other candidates, I want to say thanks to the members for tuning in. Yeah, there've been some really good questions. Thanks to PJ for being the moderator tonight, and thanks to the other candidates as well. I think we have really got a good opportunity to really strengthen our board and strengthen our organisation. More importantly, going forward, I look back at I look at the candidates we've got tonight, and there's me plus 3 other really good candidates, and I haven't got a lot of debate in my mind about most of the things that have been said by everyone tonight. I think they're all sensible answers, and I think no matter what the membership decides, I think the organisation is going to be in good hands. But certainly, if the membership decides to keep me on board or on the board, as I said at the opening, I'd like to continue what we started. We've got the magazine back. I'd like to see our transition to Part 149 completed before the end of the year. There's a lot of chat about the weight increase. I reckon we can knock that over by the end of this year, early next year. We've got some change in CASA coming. There's some really great opportunities for aviation in Australia in general, but especially RAOs and the members' organisation going forward. And I just really want to set the organisation up to continue the good work that's been done over the last 5 to 10 years and see it grow into the future.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to say one last thank you to the candidates for your time and your responses to the questions, being open and frank. I'd like to make a special mention to the RAOs team, who have worked hard behind the scenes to bring this live chat to the members. And I would like to wish the candidates all the luck in the world in the up and coming elections. And I hope to see members again in the next live chat. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.